trying to intimidate and stop her from telling the truth and exercising her rights under the Constitution, and will be commencing legal actions to sue them all for damages and injunct them from trying to stop it. I hope you all appreciate Dinesh D'Souza. And as a former member of the House of Representatives, I can tell you the same thing goes on here. The same thing we've been fighting for years. In 2013, we won the balance of power in the Senate. And in Perth, they lost the last vote, so D.O. Wang couldn't become a senator from Perth. But we challenged them and we fought them. And the Deputy Commissioner for the election in WSA resigned, and D.O. won resounding 17%, giving us the balance of power. And they've hated us ever since. On this planet, we must make God's work our own. We meet tonight in a city known for its strength, among friends known for their courage. And we find that our country is in need of courage. You know, that courage is one of the most rarest things in political or public life. But to fight for freedom is a fundamental to our humanity. We must be vigilant and forever free. In this restless pursuit, let us remember that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. To fight for freedom is a day-by-day persistent effort, year in and year out. It's a fight that you must commit yourselves to, because it protects you, your family, your rights, and the future of our community. Freedom is the breath of life for all our communities. In February 2021, the first doses of COVID-19 vaccine were administered in Australia. A rollout of vaccines followed. Private and government employers pushed their employees to receive the vaccine. Non-compliance meant termination of employment, loss of livelihood, legal or disciplinary action, destruction of careers, lives, financial ruin, and families were being destroyed. In August 2021, my wife collected my daughter from the tennis centre and arrived home very concerned. She had spoken to the wife of a police officer whose husband was being bullied to take the vaccine. Queensland police and ambulance workers had seen the side effects from this untested vaccine, and had sometimes meant death and serious injury for many people. Commissioned and non-commissioned officers, such as police officers and paramedics, lives, careers, jobs and families were threatened if they disobeyed the mandated directions made by the Commissioner of Police and the Director General of the Department of Health, forcing them to be vaccinated. I phoned the officer worried about his mental and physical state, to learn that he and his colleagues had been abandoned by their trade union movement, who was sucking up to the Labor Party. The government was determined to make an example of police and ambulance officers who believed in their right to own their own bodily integrity, and those who did not want their untested experimental drug to be injected into them. But the stark choice they faced was to take the vaccine or lose their jobs, income, careers, and face financial ruin. And in this particular officer, to throw away 15 years of service. But if he took the vaccine, the officer I spoke to was worried he might lose his life. And what then would become of him and his family? His conflict weighed heavily on my mind. I believe that citizens had the freedom of choice. The mandates had placed the police officers and the ambulance workers in a state of helplessness, as government and unions were determined to intrude and control their life and personal freedom. Governments say they care about you, but really they don't. I decided it was time to run the flag of freedom and do whatever I could to pledge whatever I had to fight this injustice. But let us all remember, that in the darkest times, the flame of justice sometimes needs help to shine the brightest. These Queenslanders did not have the means to fight such evil, dictatorial oppression set up against them. They were and they are some of the most important people in our society. Without them, our society as we know it would falter. It was time to help them, to stand up for freedom, just as they help us every day by their service. I summoned my trusted solicitor, Sam Iskander, who's sitting down here. Stand up, Sam. Stand up. Let's give him a big cheer, right? And our legal team. It was time to fight the veracity and the legality of these mandates imposed upon frontline officers without any warning or consultation. Firstly, I knew how important it was to keep my involvement a secret. Otherwise the press, not the free press, but the press would destroy our case before we made it in court. But I gave instructions to assemble the best legal team in the country and to have an unlimited budget to fight this tyranny. Regardless of the cost, consequently, 2 leading barristers from Sydney joined our legal team and immediately secured injunctions from the Supreme Court of Queensland to save the officer concerned and his cohorts further prosecution or persecution until our case could be heard by the Supreme Court of Queensland. We commenced our case as a class action on the 27th December 2021, and the hearings concluded in June 2022. But it took 1.5 years for the judgment to be handed down on the 27th of February 2024. Wow. Why did it take so long? What was so hard? The Queensland Police Commissioner, Katrina Carroll, resigned a few weeks before the judgment. A few weeks before the judgment was handed down, but not before she had admitted in court that she had not even read or understood the mandated orders and didn't want to get vaccinated herself. On the 27th of February 2024, freedom and justice triumphed. Nearly 3 years after my wife had told me of her distress, the Supreme Court of Queensland handed down its decision. The first time anywhere in the world that a Superior Court had declared that the mandates were not lawful and were contrary to every person's human rights. The government did not appeal. How could they? What they and others did to the rights of all Australians is an evil beyond words. The fight continues. Soon we will commence proceedings for the reinstatement and the compensation of all officers that have been dismissed. Compensation for all those that had been injured or died because they had to take the vaccine. In the words of a great man, the work goes on, the cause endures, and the hope still lives that the dream of freedom shall never die in the hearts of men. The flame of freedom still burns in all of us, and we've got to make sure that we'll do whatever it takes in any circumstances to protect them. And ultimately, justice shall prevail. But more work looms every day. We see more and more homeless and distress in our society. For me, I see it as a result of the gradual erosion of the freedoms that we've had, the economic freedoms of the 1960s, when the majority of the gross national product was spent in the private sector that creates wealth, where the demand and choices of the people determine the agenda of the economy. Today, the majority of our gross national product or capital is spent by the government, who's not really accountable to anybody, or not accountable to the people, but makes decisions to control every facet of our lives and restrict our freedoms. Freedoms cannot be measured by the gross national product. For too long we seem to have surrendered our personal excellence and the value of our community standards to material things. Australia's gross national product measures ambulances, the cost of ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. It counts social locks and special locks for our doors and our jails for people who break into them. It counts the cost of our armies and our navies, and the cost of television programs which glorify violence in order to sell toys to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the smile of a baby in the morning, or the love that a husband has for his wife, or the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our landscape and the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worth living on this planet. And it can tell us everything about Australia, except why we enjoy and are proud to be Australians. All that we are, all that we hold dear is protected by the freedom that we enjoy. But the evil that destroys our laws and our traditions must be resisted. If this is true here, at home, so it's true elsewhere in the world. We all know how to make war. We see it every day in the Ukraine and in Gaza. But it's much harder to make peace. To make peace is a day-by-day effort. You've got to be persistent. And slowly small gains are made. Inch by inch, we can move slowly forward to a better world. In my retirement, like many Australians, I've decided to build a boat. Early next year, work will begin to build Titanic 2. Why build Titanic 2? Why go to the moon? Because dreams are the fuel of human progress. Why does Queensland play New South Wales in the state of origin? To beat them. Why did Cook discover Australia? Because they could, and they can, and we will build the Titanic. We can bring to life the vision of so many people, artisans, artists, musicians, designers, sailors, stewards, men, women and children who sailed on the Titanic. The Titanic comes from a time when the world was different, where there was a different culture, different way of living, when people worked more for each other and for their communities, when honesty was valued, when integrity was important. Titanic 2 is all about creating goodwill across the world. In China, in Europe, in the Americas, and the world, everyone recognises the Titanic story. A story about love and self-sacrifice. A story about the musicians that continue to play as they faced eternity. Play to relieve the stress of others in their life. We're all playing our part, and it's better be one of service, one of honesty, rather than one of deception, which we face from our government. The Titanic story is all about love. It's about Jack and Rose, and everybody has their Jack and Rose story. Each night, when we go to sleep with our partner, if we're lucky, we enter in a world of reality and real communication. And we can shut out the harsh realities of the world outside us. Wouldn't it be great to live in a world where all those you spoke to could talk to you the same way, where you could have real communication and you could trust people again? But sadly, the globalists and others are trying to destroy our country, destroy our values and destroy who we are. The Titanic was the ship of dreams. I hope Titanic 2 will be a ship where dreams come true. You know, it's important we have positive stories, not concentrating on things that are negative. We've got to always look out and reach for doing better things for ourselves and our communities, and don't be mired in this despair that others give you. I want to thank Tucker Carlson for the speech he's about to give you. Right? I've heard it before, but it's great, right? And certainly, I want to thank Melissa McCann for the courage she's given, right? And I want to pledge to you all tonight that we won't desert her. No matter how hard it gets, no matter how difficult the fight is, we'll make sure we stand by her, stand by freedom and stand by honesty, and stand by her love and protection of you and your rights. I also want to thank Dinesh D'Souza. He's designed for all of us here tonight what we must do in our daily lives. That is to have the courage of our convictions, regardless of the cost each day, and care about our country and our fellow community. How hard would it have been to assemble all that equipment, to buy all that data in a search for the truth and justice? When we're over here in Australia, we think, well, there is no evidence. What Donald Trump's telling us is not true. But you've seen some of the evidence tonight. In the face of adversity, we must stand as beacons of hope and pillars of truth. The death rate in this country has increased by 18%, and 20,000 more Australians have died in the last 12 months than the previous 12 months. That's equivalent to one full jumbo jet crashing every week. You'd think you'd hear about it, wouldn't you? You'd think the press would make something of it, but they don't. Sadly, most people don't make it to hospital. Many just die or have a lonely death at home. The question has to be asked, why are so many Australians dying? And that's the question our Senator, Ralph Babet, who's here tonight in Victoria, right? Stood up in the Senate and demanded a Senate inquiry. That inquiry is proceeding at the moment, but alas, the forces of the pharmaceutical companies have moved very quickly to get Labor members, Greens members and others to block any real inquiry. Why has the death rate increased by 18% and the birth rate declined by 15%? The cycle of life is down 33% a year. You know, at the beginning, in the early stages, when hydroxychloroquine offered the best hope for mankind, I sat over dinner with Matthias Cormann, the then Australian Finance Minister in Perth. And I said to him that something had to be done to protect and defend our families, and that decisive action was needed. The Australian government, as expected, was slow to act. There were so many bureaucratic hurdles placed in front of me and others, and Matthias Cormann really asked for help, that how could we possibly stop the COVID from coming into Australia. I offered to join the fight to acquire hydroxychloroquine overseas, to fund it, and to take immediate action. The Australian Cabinet approved all of the approvals that we needed to bring hydroxychloroquine into Australia. John Skerritt, the criminal at the TGA that he is, right? Was then instructed to provide me and our companies with all the approvals we needed to import large quantities of hydroxychloroquine to protect all Australians. He did make all the authorisations to provide us with all the required exemptions. Donald Trump and the US government were cornering the world market for hydroxychloroquine, and the British government had banned its export. We needed a lot of money if we had to beat the United States and Europe in the then race for hydroxychloroquine. I personally provided all the money that was needed, and more than that, we needed good people that we could rely on. People that would be devoted and single-minded, and I called upon my daughter and my son-in-law, who scoured the world for 6 months and brought back 37 million doses of hydroxychloroquine to Australia. Enough for all Australians to stop the pandemic and to save Australian lives. The US government, with all their resources, only secured 31 million doses. The 37 million doses of hydroxychloroquine were imported into Australia and placed on the Australian government stockpile. We paid for all of it. But then once Pfizer and the lobbyists heard about it, the hydroxychloroquine was destroyed by Scott Morrison, Greg Hunt and John Skerritt, who must bear the responsibility for increased deaths and the maiming of Australians over the last 12 months. Over 80% of the deaths in hospital could have been avoided if Australia had early treatment with hydroxychloroquine and zinc. Over 9,000 Australian lives could have been saved. That was the view of Dr. Salenko before he died. You know, our work ensured that there was no shortage, as the government was later to claim. The tens of $1 million that I spent should have not been needlessly wasted, but our efforts were. But I'm still proud of what my daughter and son-in-law did, and what we tried to do for all Australians. The fact that our efforts were squashed by Pfizer and the rest of them, including John Skerritt and the corrupt TGA and Monash University, doesn't mean that our efforts were in vain. Their actions stand in contrast with the evil that this country has faced and will face again. At that time, I donated $1 million to the Royal Brisbane Hospital to fund a trial for hydroxychloroquine so it could be approved in Australia for another use against the virus. That $1 million disappeared when the TGA stopped the trial in Brisbane. You know, we need direct action. Congratulations to Melissa McCann for doing all she can to hold those responsible to account. We have to show compassion and love and forgiveness for Australians who are suffering from the vaccine injuries, who may have had different views from mine or yours, but who now need our love and support. We have to unite this country. Most of all, we have to protect our rights to be fully informed, our rights of free speech, and the freedom in our community. Ivermectin saved my life. I had double pneumonia, and I caught the Delta strain of COVID while I was battling Western Australian Premier Mark McGowan in the Sydney Federal Court. He breathed on me. I returned to Queensland only to catch the Delta strain of COVID. And I was admitted to hospital on the Gold Coast. There I sat in a room with two doctors who told me I only had 5 hours left to live. That my only chance was to take remdesivir and be placed on a ventilator. I said I was not going to do it. They said I had no other option and they'd have to make me do it to save my life. Slowly they would move towards me. I picked up a metal chair. And they backed off. Then the cavalry arrived. The hospital only had one security guard. Nearly 100 media descended upon the hospital to find out why was Clive in hospital. They invaded the hospital, opening every room, door, nook, cranny, looking for me. But I could see them coming from the COVID treatment room. Then a nurse came in and said to me, she'd come to hide me. I didn't think I was that unattractive. She'd come to hide me, to take me away to parts of the hospital that were then under construction, that were then being renovated. I picked up my mobile phone and I called my wife. If I only had 5 hours left to live, I wanted to spend it with her. She collected me from the back of the hospital. The media covered my departure. Then 5 minutes into my journey, my phone rang. It was a doctor who wanted to treat me, professor in medicine. And in 45 minutes, I was receiving large doses of ivermectin. One day later, I was feeling better. 4 days later, my oxygen saturation was more than 97%, and there was no more COVID. I realised then, as I said before, that here on earth, we must make God's work our own. At the last election, we spent $100 million to inform the Australian public. Today, over 5 million Australians are not vaccinated. That's $20 for each person. It's the best money I've ever invested. I want to thank Senator Babbitt for Victoria for the leadership and the courage of his conviction to continue to fight for freedom every day in the Senate. It's a conviction that he has shown for his commitment to his oath of office as a federal member of Parliament to protect and defend Australia and Australian people and the Australian Constitution. He joins his voice with other senators like Alex Antic, Matt Cavan, Pauline Hanson, Jared Reddick and Melbourne Roberts. Who fight every day in Canberra to expose the great crime that's being perpetrated on our community. When I lie my head on my pillow tonight, I'll say a prayer for our country and for all Australians and for all of our freedom. I'd like to thank Tucker Carlson and Dinesh D'Souza for visiting us in Australia. God bless you and your loved ones, and God bless everyone here tonight. God bless Australia. God bless freedom. Let freedom reign!